Welcome to the Innistrad Midnight Hunt pre-release breakdown. I'll be going over my best pulls, my deck build, and the results of how I actually performed in the pre-release. My only mythic of the packs opened was Lair, Disciple of the Drowned in Alt Art Frame. This was the card I actually decided to build around. Next up, I got an Extended Art Rockfall Veil, which is definitely going in one of my commander decks. Then we had Denric Pious Apprentice, which is one of the double-faced cards, and I got two Brutal Cathars, one of which was my pre-release rare. Followed up by a Sun Gold Sentinel, Galvanic Iteration, and Bloodline Culling. I ended up getting into the top 8, and as a result I managed to get a full set of the Love Your LGS foils, including the Old Frame Goblin Guide, which was actually a card I needed. In addition, another player decided they didn't want their cards at the end of the pre-release, so they gave them to me. So I got a Siphon Insight, another Denric, Unnatural Growth, and Rite of Harmony. As I finished in the top 8, I also got given 3 set boosters, and from those 3 set boosters I pulled Storm the Festival, Fatal Absence, Burn Down the House, and Vision of Duplicity. I also got a selection of foil cards and a lot of the alt art frames, but none of these are worth anything or really worth mentioning, despite being a really nice themed card. I do enjoy the alt arts, and I hope they do continue those going forward for every set. One thing I do want to mention before we get into the build phase is that the full art lands here are amazing. Like, the inking on this purple, I've never seen them do inking like it. It's black lined on the inside to give it an extra shine as you tilt the card. People were commenting on this throughout the whole pre-release, and it's the same for all of the lands. It's incredibly impressive, and I'm definitely getting a full set of each of these for some of my commander decks. I think they might even be better than the normal full art lands. So on to the deck build. As I pulled Lair, Disciple of the Drowned, I thought that would be a good build around, and as I got 2 Brutal Cathars and they act as removal, I thought I should probably move into white as well. Also, given that I drew Denric Pious Apprentice, I had at least 4 cards I could potentially utilize as part of the core of my deck. Now, Denric and Lair have kind of oppositional effects, but this didn't actually come up in any of my matches, just in case anyone wants to point that out. For my mana base, I went with an even split of 9 plains, 8 islands, and 1 Field of Ruin. The Field of Ruin primarily just in case there was some exotic land I hadn't seen before and needed to get rid of ASAP. In white, I had Lunarch Veteran, Flare of Faith, Morning Patrol, Chaplain of Alms, Cathar Commando, Search Party Captain, Gavany Trapper, and Sun Gold Sentinel. In blue, I had Revenge of the Drowned twice, Phantom Carriage, Nebelgast Intruder, Geistwave, Gale Drifter, Flip the Switch, Organ Hoarder, Component Collector, and Startle. The build strategy for my deck was to try and control my opponent's board by repeatedly removing or inhibiting their creatures, while I built up my own board of flying creatures. This was primarily by using the disturb function, such as that on Denric Pious Apprentice, Lunarch Veteran, Morning Patrol, and Chaplain of Alms, once they were destroyed or removed from the field, either by suiciding them or using them to force my opponent to give up a creature. Then disturbing them back to return them to the field in the spirit form, which has flying. Once I had enough mana on the field, I typically used Phantom Carriage as a nice heavy beater, along with putting another one of my disturb cards in the graveyard to get even more flying creatures. Nebelgast Intruder definitely proved its worth as a defensive cantrip. Flashing it in repeatedly allowed me to kill other creatures and got me another flying creature to hit my opponent straight to the dome. Revenge of the Drowned definitely did its work, giving me the free zombie. Unfortunately, Given the choice, my opponent usually put the card I removed back on the top of their deck and then just resummoned it the next turn, but does give them the summon sickness, which allowed me to prevent them attacking repeatedly. The Brutal Cathars definitely proved their worth as well, exiling cards I needed removed ASAP. Their reverse side was never really utilised. That was more due to misplays that were repeatedly happening throughout everyone's games. The new mechanic was a bit of a challenge for people to get a handle of, and I'll get more into that later. And Lair, Disciple of the Drowned, definitely put his worth in, even though I only had a handful of instant and sorcery cards in my deck. So getting into my matches themselves, the first match I was up against a red deck, and I didn't manage to stabilize my board state fast enough to hit them to the head, and they managed to burn me down first, resulting in 2 losses for me. The second matchup I was against a red-white-black deck. They didn't get to stabilize their mana base properly initially, but did manage to get Enduring Angel onto the field towards the latter half of the game. It became a very close game, but I managed to remove Enduring Angel using Revenge of the Drowned and swing in for the kill before they could bring it back to the field. My third opponent was a green-white deck. They managed to get Consuming Blob out onto the field, along with Unruly Mob. Together they started to build up worryingly. Thankfully I had Sun Gold Sentinel on the field and was able to continually exile card types from his graveyard, preventing him building up Consuming Blob. The second match of this round became very close, and I barely managed to survive his complete swing out and then swing back with my flyers to overpower him. My final match was against a green-white deck that made use of 2 copies of Briarbridge Tracker and Candlegrove Witch. Briarbridge Tracker proved to be relatively annoying as I didn't have any creatures with more than 4 toughness, and thus had no way to survive a hit from it. I repeatedly removed it, actually 3 times in one game, with Revenge of the Drowned, unfortunately generating a token for them in each case. It was a very close match, but again the Flyers won out and were able to swing over and end the game. Overall I went 6-2, which got me 6th place, or joint 3rd, as only 2 players went 4-0. I'm quite happy with that result. It's better than I expected to do, and it was high enough to get me the promos, which, even if they're not the most valuable prizes, I do like getting them. I like the feeling of having unique cards. The main thing that I noted in the pre-release was that no one really got to grips with the day-night mechanic, the day-bound, night-bound. We had a lot of confusion over whether cards with day-bound on them made it day or night, even if they didn't specify, because some of the cards did, some of the cards didn't, and people were playing that differently in each game. A lot of people also didn't remember to swap their cards, or were swapping the spirit cards when they didn't have to. This was the main source of confusion in all of the games I played, and I'm not sure if I'm a fan of the mechanic. Again, I'm not really a fan of double-sided cards, just from a practicality perspective, where you have to take it out of a sleeve and swap it around. I feel it breaks the flow of gameplay, and it's just annoying to have to mess with your deck like that. The Disturb mechanic I did enjoy. It's essentially just flashback with a slightly different flavour. It's fun to have graveyard interaction, and definitely with Lair and a bunch of Disturb cards, you can make full use of your graveyard. This was also the first in-person pre-release we've had since the pandemic started, so it was really nice to get to play with actual physical cards again. There's just something about it that makes the game that much better. And it was nice to see a range of decks, people building it out, having to actually theorycraft and have a reason to do it. I went in blind, didn't really read any of the spoilers, just read up on the basics of drafting again, as it has been years since I've had to do it, so I was very much rusty on it. A good experience and a good time was had by all. Let me know how your pre-release experiences went. Did you get any good polls? Did you pull ahead at the last minute? Was there some amazing prize support at your pre-release events? Just let me know below. Thanks for joining, and if you enjoyed the content, please don't forget to like and subscribe.